Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the second episode of Why Are We Here? And I am going to make this a monthly thing. I've already got guests starting to line up for next month. But for this month, we have a super exciting show because I have two guests on here that I have wanted for a long time and just for one reason or another have never been able to connect with, and two guests on here that I've had before and are good old friends. So first, let's start with Dr. Josh because I've not had you on before. Can you just say hello and give us a brief introduction? We'll go into a lot of more detail of what you do a little bit in a couple of minutes.
Oh yeah, I love going first. I'm kidding. I will either say far too little or far too much. So I'm Joshua Bowen. My wife Megan and I have a YouTube channel called Digital Hammurabi, and we're ancient Near Eastern. I was going to say we're ancient Near Eastern people. That's not really. We like working with the ancient Near East, but I have a PhD from Johns Hopkins University. I was a Christian for 26 years, I think. Pastored a church for 7 of those. So yeah, I guess that's me.
Okay, cool. And Erika, you're another person that I've never had actually on my channel, although I have used clips of some of your work in some of my videos. And there's a picture in particular that I have used frequently, and I don't know if you made it or if you just used it because I found it on your channel. It's the one where they compare the different skulls, and some of the creationists say that they're apes and other creationists say that they're humans. They can't agree on which one it is.
Oh, that one is beautiful. Yeah, I actually found, I think I had that given to me quite some time ago. So I wish I could say that was an original, but no, it unfortunately is not. Although I bet you could add quite a bit to it now. That would be a fun project to see who's saying what these days.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Erika.
Yeah, so I'm really into paleoanthropology, human evolution, primates, things of that nature. I'm currently getting my master's of research in primatology. I just finished my statistical analysis this week, so I'm very excited to just finally finish that thesis and knock it out. And I would love to, continue along that pathway and hopefully, get my doctorate one of these days. But I mostly focus on my channel with human evolution, primates, paleontology, zoology, things of that nature, and quite a bit of busting young Earth creationism, because I found that a lot of folks out there really aren't down with the fact that they're, like an ape. And I don't get that because I think that that's one of the coolest things. So, that it bums me out that other people don't find that as just awe-inspiring as I do. So my goal is to just get everyone out there to love being monkey.
Okay, very good. I have noticed that I am junk shopping a bit. And if you're not familiar with the term junk shopping, it's one that we've made up because Junk Shop Library is the king of having internet issues, and he starts freezing up. And I've been freezing up just a bit here. I seem to be having a bit of an internet issue here. So if I freeze up, just keep carrying on. I'll be back eventually. Okay, Brainbug. We've had you on before, and we've done a collab together before. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, I'm Brian. I run the Brainbug YouTube channel, and that's where we visit the hive and we use insects to learn science. I love bugs, kinds of creepy crawlies. I got some here with me. We always have a good time and like to explore biology, ecology, all these wonderful fields that all overlap.
Okay, very good. And Jen, you are probably my oldest friend. I've been working with you for quite some time. You taught me most of what I know about what it means to be transgender, and I have absolutely run with that and done about 4 different programs on that. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I think you've actually done more videos on being trans than I have. Which is absolutely amazing. But mostly because whilst I talk about LGBTQ issues, I don't do a lot of actual videos based on that. I do most of my stuff based on debunking bad science, and just talking about science in general because I love it so much. My background, though, is in maths and computer science, but I love physics and virtually anything. And I'm one of those Australian apes. So, Erika, I'm definitely an ape.
Yeah. The real question is how you guys are managing to be bipeds down there when you're just being pulled off the face of the planet and all.
Yeah, we have to. We grow these toes that can grip into the earth. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm picturing some kind of.
It's a marsupial thing, you see. We're marsupial apes.
Oh, that would be incredible.
That would be awesome. Ken Hovine's going to love this if he ever sees it.
Marsupial apes.
Marsupial apes, yeah.
Get a sound clip of that.
Yeah. Oh my God, Kent.
And we have quite a few people in the chat here. I want to just say hello real quick to B, the family. Ian, I'm not sure, it's Ian Davenport was the first one here today. And Fran Wilson, it's always good to see you. Godless Sewing, God equals the square root of -1, Ox, Atheist Mo. Did I miss anybody? There's probably a few others that are lurking that we can't see. Robin is always lurking, and sometimes if we say Robin's name, Robin will pop up. If you don't know Robin is my son, and he's trans, which is one of the reasons why I've done a number of videos on trans.
Robin is awesome. So
yeah, Robin is.
Anyone's not following Robin on Twitter, go and do that.
Yeah.
Robin did some really fun graphics for the video that I just taped this morning or this afternoon and will release to the public probably on Friday. And that's going to be fun too. Okay, so why are we here? Why do we do what we do? What is each of our channels all about, and why do we think it's important to do this? And let's go ahead and start with Dr. Josh. Josh, why are you here? Why are you on YouTube?
I guess there are a couple ways to talk about that, but when I finished my doctoral work, Megan was still doing hers, and for life reasons, we had to sort of give up the goal of getting a professorship somewhere, tenure track positions. So went a different direction with work. But this was sort of a nice. I really like teaching, and I really enjoy interacting with people that are interested non-specialists in things like the ancient Near East and the Hebrew Bible. And so this was a really great outlet. Megan started the channel, and we started putting out videos just sort of introducing everybody to what the ancient Near East is. I started putting out videos after a while on some of these more contentious topics that apologists like to bring up, slavery in the Old Testament, or the date of the book of Daniel, Ezekiel 26, with the prophecy against Tyre, those sorts of things that are sort of hot button issues that apologists tend to have sort of quick answers for, and they're not really good. It sounds bad, but I mean, like, they're not sufficient, I suppose. So sort of, getting everybody on the right page, be they Christian or skeptic, being able to move forward, understanding what the text is actually saying, whichever direction you want to go with it. But Megan came up with, pretty shortly after we started the channel, she came up with the idea, doctoral students don't have any money, really, almost ever. And they, sometimes, depending on your program, will get paid during the semesters. But over the summer, you really are sort of left to fend for yourself. And she crowdfunded a scholarship program called Humans Against Poor Scholarship. And we were able to give away two $2,000 grants. So we gave away three $2,000 grants. So $6,000 total to three different PhD students to try to get them bridge that gap over the summer. and she's recently made HAPS into a nonprofit. So now we don't have to pay taxes on the money that we bring in, which was quite a shock to us when we initially had to do it. But yeah, it's she's doing really great stuff with that. We do lots of interviews with scholars and young students, scholars and young PhD students. They come on the channel, talk about their research. So she just added another scholarship program called Black Scholars Matter, in which we take an undergraduate who is in their senior year, who is interested in getting into the field of the ancient Near East, and paying for them to go out and to stay and to pay their conference costs at a conference, one of the annual conferences, and aligning a senior scholar up to meet them, to introduce them to other scholars in the field so that they can become well acquainted with sort of the bigger names. Because it's one of the big things when you're a PhD student and you go to these conferences, you're terrified to talk to anybody because they're just these brilliant people that you've read all their papers and their books. And so you never really network. And that's really the big point of one of the big aspects of those conferences. So sort of forced networking, and that will give, I think African-American scholars, a much better chance of getting into the field, because there aren't a lot in the field of Near Eastern studies, Egyptology, that sort of thing. So we're excited about that. Anyway, that was a lot.
Okay, very good. Erika, what do you do and why do you do it?
Oh man, yeah. I was thinking I was going to start the "Why are we here?" with this plucky young hominin like 7 million years ago just so happened to find some benefit in standing up on those wobbly back legs and taking a look over the grass. But then I thought, I don't know that that's a funny way of starting it off. And then I was like, well, now that I'm wondering if it's funny, it's definitely funny. So I'm bringing it up. But the reason why I'm on YouTube, that's a great question. So I was raised young Earth creationist in a young Earth creationist middle school. So I went to a public high school after that. My parents were really non-denominational. They really couldn't care less about young Earth creationism as like a doctrinal position. But they wanted me to go to a Christian school, so they sent me to one that just so happened to be a young Earth institution, if you will. And while there, they had one of the classic things that young Earth creationist schools do when they're indoctrinating the youth, which is they have a worldviews course, and tend to lump evolutionary theory in with naturalism or existentialism, and all of these more philosophical positions. And it was very shocking for me because when I finally did end up in a public high school, I got my grubby mitts on a real biology textbook and had the opportunity to kind of look through it. And I was like, uh-oh, wait a second. A lot of this stuff makes a whole lot of sense. And, my anecdote about that is I remember being told in that worldview class, they were like, yeah, these scientists, they claim they found a Homo habilis. They haven't found a Homo habilis. It's all fake. It's just a skull cap, and then I remember thinking at that time, okay, well then why does it have a name if they've never found any? First of all, they actually, got the species that they were talking about wrong, but started looking into the hominins and I was like, oh boy, this is really stepwise. And then I was like, oh boy, we're really similar to a lot of other animals, and a lot of those animals happen to be primates. And then I was like, oh boy, evolution is a fact. That's a real shocker. So I brought it up to my parents and they were like, if you think that, sure. I mean, there's no problem with it. And so I got really into this whole, stance of theistic evolution. I was like, this is the one for me. Theistic evolution is it. And I picked my undergrad school, and I was planning on the pre-veterinary path and all that, but I had the opportunity to go do a study abroad in Tanzania, my summer of my freshman year. And I got to go to Gombe Stream National Park and Olduvai Gorge and, all these, just incredibly significant places for human evolution. And I realized I was really into it. And I was like, damn, I think this is what I'm going to do. You have an encounter with a chimpanzee and, where Jane Goodall had the opportunity to study them. And it was kind of a life-changing experience. And so I was like, well, I guess maybe that'll be the thing for me. And so it was, I kind of picked that as a path and just took that in stride and was like, I picked up a minor in anthropology, and then I was like, maybe I'll get my PhD. I love primates. I decided on the primatology thing for a while, but I did get a job one summer working as a veterinary assistant in my hometown. And one of my coworkers, this my hometown is rural Indiana. So one of my coworkers was a very vocal young Earth creationist. He's the kind of guy that casual conversation will find ways to bring up, hey, Mary Schweitzer, soft dinosaur tissue. Did you know that insert some meme about the second law of thermodynamics? And so one day I was like, it's really interesting that you're saying all this stuff, because my minor's in anthropology, and I got another minor in bio, and I've got an animal science degree, and kind of know this stuff decently well. Let's get some coffee. So we started getting coffee once a month and just hashing these kinds of conversations out. And I ended up doing all this research on topics that I knew were true, but didn't know why they were true. Things like, okay, radiometric dating works. Okay, well, why does it work? I spent hours and hours, okay, down to the minutia of why does it work? Or, how do we know which hominins are hominids and which aren't? Or, how do we know that, the dinosaurs, the ancient theropods eventually gave way to the lineage of birds that we see today? How do we know all of these things? And as I was kind of compiling that together, I was like, damn, I really hope no one else has to take the time to look all this stuff up. So I started getting involved in the subreddit Debate Evolution, where my screen name is the same, Gutsick Gibbon. I started putting all these mega posts up there of like, hey, I did all this research. I hope someone can benefit from this. Here's what I found out. Here are my sources. And then one day I was like, man, I like talking in front of a camera. I was like, maybe I'll just do this on YouTube. And my channel was really small until one day I happened to catch one of Kent Hovind's debates, if you want to call it that. And he was like, I'll debate anyone out there with, half my brain tied behind my back. I'm telling you right now, animals don't come out of the water and then evolve to go back into the water. I was like, I could debate that guy. So I emailed his current secretary, Rhonda, and I actually miss Rhonda a lot. Rhonda quit very shortly after I encountered Kent Hovind. But I ended up debating on modern day debate. I got into the debate scene, and that's kind of just what I do now. Is I argue with creationists online, and then the real thing I like to do is make videos about the actual science, and hope that people find it as interesting as I do. So now that I have sufficiently surpassed Dr. Josh's opening monologue, let me toss it to the next person.
You got to mention your cartooning too, though, Erika. Your cartoons are one of the charming pieces of your channel.
I was a big doodler in high school, and there was a time period where I really wanted to be an animator, and then I realized how much goes into animation, and I was like, I don't think that's for me. But I put it to good work on the channel.
I tried my hand at animation. I made a 1-minute animation. I took Ken Hand's announcement that they were opening something up, and I had a gorilla walk in and pull everyone off the stage and pound the ark. And just that 1-minute animation, it took me like 15 hours of actual work to make it. And my computer crashed like 20 times because my processor is not equipped to handle that. And the program that I was working it on really wasn't equipped to handle animation. But eventually I did get it together, and it's on my channel.
Yeah, time feels longest when you're jogging or animating. Those are like the two violation activities.
Well, I, for one, really appreciate what you do, because I am way behind the learning curve. I have kids that are about your age, and I made the mistake of sending them to Christian schools where they learned young Earth creationism. And it was actually my youngest child that finally showed me that, hey, Mom, this stuff doesn't work.
Well, that's the thing about it, though, is that it's like, Aaron's tag on that is like, yeah, with young Earth creationism, it's like more lies in the sentence than there are words in the sentence. And that's something that holds especially true when you're trying to like explain why young Earth creationism doesn't work. Because in conventional science, there are a lot of things that people accept on outright because they're so well supported. Things like, okay, well, radioactive decay occurs at this rate. But when you're arguing with the unearthed creationism, you have to show why that is the case. Like you have to just overkill the living hell out of the conversation just to get one like universally accepted point across, and then you can start the conversation. So I am, huge kudos to your kid there, because that's got to be it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, and what you were talking about, I was watching your video earlier today, that is your latest in the myth busting series. And I'm going through your arguments and say, oh, I can argue that. And then going, no, I can't argue that, because even though I can understand it, I don't understand it well enough that I could actually spit that back out to someone else. Like your plate tectonics and the mud rivers. I went, okay, but I could never get through that trying to explain that to someone else.
If it makes you feel any better, you saw in the thing, I look it all up, because they'll say something and you're like, okay, I know that that's not true, but let's dig up why it's not true, and then digging through all these. Thankfully, I have a friend who's a geologist, so whenever I don't understand any of that stuff, I'm like, hey, can you please tell me what this is saying? I don't get it. So it's, we all for sure have like our areas that we're more well versed in, and that's the best part about having a community, is that when you don't know what you're talking about, someone does, and you can just be like, hey, explain this to me.
Okay, very good. Good to know. Brian, what do you do on your channel and why?
Yeah. Okay. So I was never a creationist. I was raised in a pretty, I guess, agnostic household, but we always had lots of books, and there was always books on biology and stuff. Was the interest my grandpa had, and we inherited those. And there was always those citations in the back. And all my life, I was like, oh, I want to read that. So I really got into when the internet came around, collecting citations, and I joined groups and stuff to have all these science papers, just like a library of them on file, and I would get into debates with people about science, and I would have the papers there to support what I was saying, which come to find out they don't really care much about papers, but I always thought it was important to cite your research. So there's a lot of myths and stuff about different animals, but mainly I focus on insects because I have an insect collection. But a lot of myths that people are misconceptions about biology that people have in the ecology of insects, and just the common everyday things that people like, oh, like a bee shouldn't be able to fly, and things like that. That just make their way into our culture that are total BS. And I'm like, I have all these papers and all this research on these topics, and people are still, believing this nonsense. Why don't I bring that out to everybody and show them the truth around these misconceptions? But for a long time, I was doing bug shows for elementary school kids. I had all the van, and I'd take the bugs around, and we'd do the little shows at birthday parties or like for classrooms and stuff. And I get to teach them a little bit about that. So being able to like kind of combine those two passions together, it kind of really came together all on its own.
Okay, very good. And Jen, tell us about your channel.
Yeah, my channel's become kind of eclectic lately because, I started out mostly doing debunking of stupid people saying stupid science stuff, and I got to the point where I got sick of doing that, and I got to the point where people were wanting me just to swear at people, and that's kind of defeated the purpose of making the videos I was making, so I lost interest in it. So I tend to more do streams now where I actually just talk science straight out with different people, usually taking questions from the floor, because I really kind of enjoy that, because then you're getting asked questions and you're being challenged, and it helps me learn, and I think it helps the people learn who watch them. So that's more been the way I want to do, but I want to do more videos where I talk about maths and science in general. I did the video about what planet on average is the closest to all the other planets in the solar system, and just showing the maths using a compass and a pencil, basically, just to dumb it down for people who don't actually get why. Because I mean, it's pretty simple why, but most people don't think about it, because maths is like that. You don't always think about it. I mean, I get annoyed every time I see God equals the square root of -1 in the chat, because he uses that name to suggest that God is imaginary, but complex numbers are not imaginary. They are actually real and exist. We call them complex numbers, not imaginary numbers, for a reason. So it frustrates me. And he knows it frustrates me. Because they're definitely real. But I have a question for Brian. Do people really actually still ask about bees and flying?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I was I argue with people. I like to argue with people about animal science. I didn't know if you guys knew this or not, but yeah, I love to argue with people about animal science. So I go into one of my favorite places is the Kent Hovind Facebook group. I go in there and they will make those claims that I had somebody make a claim that this is a picture of a mosquito, and they're like, mosquito hasn't changed in 3 billion years. Explain that. And it's like, it was an amber. It was an amber. 3 billion year old amber, I guess, was the. But people make all kinds of the lunacy claims. But bees shouldn't be able to fly was one of the ones that got me going down the insect route for sure.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it amazes me that people even ask that, especially when we've made models of insects. I mean, when I say models, they're larger than actual insects, and they will actually fly using the same dynamics of wing movement. I mean, it was a complete misunderstanding of how insect wings move that led to that belief that they shouldn't be able to fly.
Right. Yeah. There's someone sent me a video today of a new little beetle that they made, a flying beetle using the mechanics of the scarab's wings to make a better drone. And because they can fly, and the way that their body's set, they can hit stuff, they can bounce off walls and stuff, and it doesn't. I mean, anybody who's seen a beetle flying around, they bump into stuff all over the place. It doesn't slow them down a bit. So it would, as far as like rescuing people in like collapsed buildings and stuff, and in search parties like that, excellent design. So not only are they are insect wings capable of flight, they're more efficient at flight than what we generally make.
Yeah, well, I mean, our versions of flight are very, very inefficient.
Yeah,
we make up for inefficient wing design by really, really powerful engines.
Yeah,
burning those fossil fuels.
Burning them fossil fuels, yeah.
Brian, I was actually in a chat, or in a room rather, the other day with several big ID proponents, and one of the I get into the whole reason I got into the call, which I wasn't planning on getting into it, because I'd come back from a Christmas party with my future in-laws, and it was a Christmas party, so I was very wine drunk, and I'm sitting getting ready to get into this. I wasn't planning on getting in the chat, but at some point one of them said something that was just so like mind-meldingly dumb that I was like, okay, I'm gonna get in the chat. So I hopped in, and we started having this conversation. And one of the arguments that was being made was essentially, I think the genera is Issus, the geared leg nymph form of one of the
like a leaf hoppers. Yeah.
Yeah, the Hematarins, yes.
So Hematarins, not to be confused with Hematophorans, which is bees and wasps and stuff. But yeah, Hematarins. They're tiny little leaf bugs. They actually got some pretty cool looking nymphs with their fluffy tails and stuff. But yeah, they have the gear in their hopping joints. They hop better than anything, really, anything in the insect world. And that's another thing, like the wing, that we can learn from that mechanic how to make our machines better. So yeah, what was the argument being made that was proof that
Yeah, it was a classic ID argument, and my whole stance was like, all right, I guarantee you that if we go and we look to closely related genera, we're just closely related species too, because he was under the impression that it was a single species, and that this was not a nymph phase thing. This was a whole throughout the entire life of the insect. It's got these gears that allow it to jump more efficiently. And when I looked into it afterwards, I found out actually, at least that's what the article was saying, that the reason why they evolved to lose these gears into their adult phase is because if one of the teeth of the gears breaks, it screws up the whole jumping process. So they get a less precise but a more safe version as adults, almost
More sustainable, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm reading about this and I'm like, yeah, I guarantee you, if we look to closely related genera or species, we're going to find something of a gradient of, less precise teeth, more just jagged, almost looking gears, type structures. And if you go back far enough in time, or, in the existing tree of life, you're probably going to find something with just like almost like a ball joint that's less of a teeth on a gear and more like soft bumps that kind of engage with one another, but certainly not to the degree that a gear would. Because from my perspective, I'm always like, you want to play the irreducible complexity game? Okay. Pick a structure. Let's go back. See how far we can go back. But then, the second you pick a structure and you take it down that rabbit hole, it's back to the vague gesturing.
You would just get it's still a bug though. Once you start trying to go back, it's still a bug. There's no evolution. It's still a bug. Those are adaptations.
Give birth to cats.
Every time. Yeah. Could you ever get one of those bugs as big as Texas?
Right.
Let me
Erika, would you like to respond to God equals square root of -1's question?
The Kitzmiller versus Dover case. I don't typically bring it up, but if it came up, it's certainly an excellent point with regard to, okay, well, why not teach the controversy? And there's two reasons why we don't teach the controversy. One is because ID is repackaged creationism, as shown during the Kitzmiller versus Dover case. But the more important reason is that intelligent design lacks a model. There is no model to this idea. No matter how you spin it, no matter how you look at it, from lacking a criteria for what is and what is not designed, because typically ID people will be of the opinion that you can have limited evolution, but at some point you reach this gap that evolution can't bridge. Therefore, you have to have an intelligent agent.
But there's no mechanism that they can point to say this is the stopping point.
There's no line. Yeah, there is no line that exists. And typically you'll take that all the way back to abiogenesis. Sometimes you can get it to the proeukaryotic split. But ID is a model-less, vague, nebulous idea, and thus it can't be taught. If you can't test it, it's not a model. And Kitzmiller versus Dover showed that, very concisely, right? So it's an awesome case. It's really, and it's got Ken Miller on it, and Ken Miller's just a cool guy.
Josh, I'm interested. You told us earlier that you used to be a pastor of a church. What denomination did you pastor?
It was very close to Baptist. Specifically, it was called Grace Gospel Fellowship. So if anybody knows anything about these things, they're mid-acts dispensational.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know anything about that, that's no loss. What?
And what caused you to leave the church and then eventually leave the faith?
Yeah. So, I was raised fundamentalist evangelical. I was saved when I was 6. My grandparents were sort of the primary spiritual influence in my life. And, I'd memorized the books of the Bible, within 6 months or something. They used to drill me to say them as fast as I could. And then I learned to eventually say them backwards. So, it was that the text of the Bible was not only the inspired and inerrant word of God, but it was all that there was. So any decision that was made, any thought that I had, it was always "What saith the Scriptures," right? That was always the phrase that we used. What saith the Scriptures? So that was the entirety, really, of my life until I was about 30. And that's so I guess when I was in 2004, I was in my early 20s, I guess. And I started going to seminary, and I was in the Air Force, and I wanted to go back as a full-time chaplain. And so while I was going to seminary, they wanted me to get some actual experience in order to come back in as a chaplain. So I started pastoring this church out in Virginia as the assistant pastor first, and then associate pastor. But, I remember I ended up teaching Hebrew at the seminary for the last 2 years that I was there. And I got accepted to Johns Hopkins, which was crazy to me. And I got accepted into that program. And when I left, I was getting ready to leave and start at the school. One of the, I was either the dean, I think it was the dean of the school, said to me, "So are you ready to go?" Because Hopkins is a very liberal school. And I remember holding up my Hebrew Bible, and I said, "I'm going into the lion's den, but I'm going to win souls for Christ." Right? That was my goal. And given, it's funny because the seminary that I went to Liberty University for my bachelor's degree, and then the seminary that I went to was also fundamentalist evangelical. So one of the big pros of going to a school like that is they are huge emphasis on the languages. So I learned Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic and Akkadian and some Ugaritic and some Syriac. I mean, it was like you learn the language as well, which has served me very well. But there isn't a lot of engagement with these bigger issues, right? The dating of the book of Daniel is just sort of taken for granted. The Mosaic authorship of the Pentateuch is just taken for granted, right? You might have, like, we had an apologetics class, sort of, they didn't call it that, but it was like, defense of the gospel or something. I don't remember what it was called, but you learn some sort of stock arguments that I now hear coming from the other side, and you don't ever really get deep into the problems because it's not relevant. So then when I got to Hopkins, I start reading Sumerian, Akkadian, and I'm reading these literary texts from, 1,000+ years earlier, and realizing, damn, the Bible isn't this thing that I thought it was. And then learning at the same time the actual history and archaeology of not only the Near East, but of the Southern Levant. And it just became very problematic very quickly. And so that, because I was raised fundamentalist evangelical and not like Anglican or, Episcopalian or something, the inerrancy of the text was paramount. Mm-hmm. And if the Bible isn't 100% accurate in that sort of colloquial sense that we use it, then none of it is. It's all bullshit because it's
an all or nothing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And so I became an atheist my first year at Hopkins, and I stayed an atheist probably more because of apathy. I didn't really care too much to go back into it. My second year, I sort of came back to a nicer, maybe middle ground of agnostic atheism, and that's sort of where I've stayed. But I think this is part of the, maybe ironically, I feel like our YouTube channel and the things that I talk about on the channel are actually guarding against people falling from the faith in the way that I did. Because I think it challenges people and that's sort of my goal, is most of what I put out really is only applicable to fundamentalist evangelicalism. So, my friend Caleb, who's out at Tyndale right now doing a postdoc, he went to Hopkins with me as an Assyriologist, and he minored in Hebrew Bible as well. And, I remember I met with him a couple years ago at an annual conference when we started the channel, and I said, "Yeah, I'm getting ready to do this video on the prophecy against Tyre in Ezekiel 26." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, people argue that it wasn't about Nebuchadnezzar solely; it was also about Alexander, and so you have to kind of show that it was just about Alexander and that it failed." And he said, "There are people that don't know that. I don't understand." He's a strong evangelical Christian going, why would anybody argue that? Right? That's not an issue for them. It's really only an issue for, I think, a group of fundamentalist evangelicals. But there are just so many of them here on social media that it's important. So, yeah.
That leads me to a question. There's an argument that I just recently formulated, and I haven't used it yet because it gets hung up on language in Genesis. And one very small word, and I'm a little bit leery of using it because I'm not so certain that the translation is perfect. And that is, you frequently hear AIG and the fundamentalists argue that you can't be transgender because God made people male and female. Mm-hmm. And my return would be, Genesis says he made them male and female, not or female. So if God made them male and female, they can be either one. Am I okay with that argument, or am I putting too much into a word that really can't be that is not that specific?
So a couple of things that, and I think this is one of the things that when we step into their worldview and we step into their interpretive model, it leads us down rabbit trails trying to argue things, which is frustrating because it's not enough to just say Genesis isn't a science text, right? It's not what it's doing. But you can't do that. I mean, you can, but then you're not adopting their interpretive model. So, the two words there, and I haven't looked at that, but I suspect it's Sachar and Nekeva, which is just sort of the general terms for male and female. So anticipating that the biblical texts are going to have a concept of transgender or third gender, it's difficult because we do have evidence for third gender in, for example, I just published a book on my dissertation, and it's like a popular level book, but there's a type of priest that the book, a bunch of the book is about, and it's called the Gala priest. And the Gala priest is thought to have been considered third gender, like a liminal gender. And articles about this, obviously, and I'm just sort of presenting that data in a lot of ways. But they're a liminal figure, so they could be a good intermediary in the minds of the people, sort of being in the middle between male and female. They could also be an intermediary between humanity and the gods, right? They fit that role, and so that's what Gala priests did. Now, I mean, the rationale there is odd, but that's how they thought about it. But I don't know that. I guess I'd have to think about it.
Okay.
All of that, I'd have to think about it. If you're stepping into their interpretive model, I think that's fine because, I don't think it's Zachar Unekeva, so male and female, if I'm remembering it correctly. So yeah, it's not necessarily or there. So I guess if you're sticking hard line with how they're taking the text, that would probably be okay. But I think the bigger issue is that the text isn't dealing with that concept at all. It doesn't. It's not making a statement about that. What could be implied from it maybe is different. Maybe that would be an angle to go with. But really, I think at the end, you end up having this like saying things like, well, they made God created plants before there was the sun. That's true. And I guess in their interpretive model that can be problematic, but it's not for them, right? Because they would say, "Oh, it's the next day, so plants will be fine for a day." Yeah.
Well, the
They're
other
weird.
argument I make is that Eve is trans.
Yeah.
God took a male rib and made a female out of it. Eve is trans.
Genetically, yeah.
Yeah.
Genetically.
One of the things that you could probably look at that would be interesting, and again, it's probably not going to be as interesting for the people that you're talking to about it, the Answers in Genesis people, but later Jewish interpretation of what happened in Genesis, 2, 1 and 2, how they understood how the humans were created and how they were divided, and it's actually something interesting to. If you want to email me about it, I can give you some links or some citations for that. But yeah, it's frustrating because the text isn't about that, right? It's not. But I guess you run into that no matter what you do. If you start talking about the flood and they want to talk about some worldwide flood, the Hebrew Bible doesn't envision the Earth is flat, right? In the Old Testament, the Earth is flat. It is not a globe, right? It's on pillars. There's a dome over it. The flood is because they open up the lattice work in the heavens and the sky in that big dome, and they let up all the water, the fresh water. I mean, come on. It's like, the argument is just so bizarre to me. But you're having to get down in there with them, and so I understand having to argue from their perspective. So yeah,
their argument of man and woman from creation is irrelevant anyway. When you because even if you started out with just a male and a female, you're still going to have intersex people born from those male and females. And then it comes down to what your definition of male and female actually is. And we're not even talking about trans identities now. We're just talking about the spectrum of those are actually sex itself. Because that their sex is not a true binary. It isn't just male and female. There is so much variation between what you would consider as male and female. Yes, they're the norms which the bimodal distribution moves around, but it's not a true binary. But that they go, oh, these are freaks and outliers. Well, fuck off if you're going to say that to me, because I'm a minority within a minority within a minority, so you can fuck off with that idea.
I was absolutely shocked when I found out that there are as many intersex people as there are people with green eyes.
Yeah, it's quite common. That the various different types of intersex have different ratios, and I'm one of the rarer ones. But even then, it's still not uncommon. But to be trans and intersex together is kind of unusual, is even rarer, because both are still minorities. So minorities within minorities. And but yeah, I mean, their argument of male and female is, yeah, come on, define male and female, because there is so much possible overlap between that male and female, right down to what would have in the past be called a true hermaphrodite, where it is so ambiguous that you almost cannot tell the difference. Mind you, they don't like things about ambiguity and not being able to tell the difference, because that's what goes back to Erika's skulls.
Yeah, nature is one big fat gradient. That's all it is.
Yeah,
So-
that's all it is. Everything about nature is one big fat gradient. And as soon as you start to understand that, you get a picture. Humans especially do not fit in boxes, but nature itself doesn't in any way, shape, or form. You cannot just shove everything in boxes.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
especially
the closest
like cognitive species, like a species that's capable of being like, wait, what am I? Right.
The closest thing you get to a true binary when you're talking about sex is gametal sex, well, which used to be called just biological sex, which is where people got confused about sex. But
Right.
because there are only for most species, especially mammals, there are only two types of gametes, and that is it. So that is as close as you can get to being a true binary. But it's not even a fair comparison because there's so many different types of gametes within the animal kingdom that.
Well, you get like protostomia. I mean,
yeah, and then you've got to say, yeah, that works if you're talking about populations as a whole. It doesn't work when you're talking about individuals within the population because there's still variance. You know, you can have weird ass things that could never produce offspring that is a variation on the human gamete. That is still a variation, but it won't produce offspring. So where does that fit into that line of there are only two gametes? Because it doesn't work. It just biology is not neat and fixed in one location at all. So any arguments from that it just fall flat when confronted with the actual science of it all.
I have a question actually for you guys. So one of the things I listened to a lot of Kent Hovind debates more for fun, I think, than anything, like 2 years ago. Yeah, it was fun to just listen to him go on. But one of the things that has always sort of struck me as odd is the use of the word kind. So how does, let me preface this with, if you guys can think of a subject that you are terrible at, then that's what I am with math and science. So I'm worse, I'm sure.
History, that's my bad one.
So when he uses the word kind, and it's particularly when it comes to like the flood, it seems like he's making the argument, or that people like that are making the argument that species weren't taken on the ark. It was some bigger category, right? So like instead of 7 different species of dog, it was just
one.
The dog kind?
Yes,
Yep.
the dog kind.
On the ark, and all other dog kinds evolved from that.
Yeah, but it gets kind of murky there because then you got vulps that do foxes don't interbreed with canids. So is that a different kind? And
AIG says it's roughly at the family level, except when it's not. That's like
okay. So when you talk about family level, there's a family of beetles that has 83,000 species. So considering the flood was 4,000 some years ago,
they didn't have beetles on the ark. They survived on floating logs.
Yeah, my favorite part about the floating logs is that I've heard a very non-satirical explanation for the coal seams that we have. That there were these big floating forests, right? And these big floating forests were just chilling around, going all over the planet as the continents are moving around at race car speeds, of course, which is what you require to get your Pangea or your Rodinia in current formation. So, you picture this, you got this big peat swamp floating on the top of the oceans where mega tsunamis, that is to say, waves that are upwards of 1,700 feet high, are zooming all across, moving the continents around. It's really hot because, the fountains of the deep are opening up and you've got all this crazy shit happening. And all the while, the beetles are relaxing on these floating islands as if nothing's happening. It's a pleasant cruise for these guys. They don't care, except for the times that they need the coal seams, in which case lightning struck the floating forests and turned it into coal as it sunk down below the waves and deposited where it is.
They have no idea how coal forms.
God no. Yeah, that's non. I mean, that is 100% a real explanation I've heard.
Coal's not formed by lightning and floating foliage.
Yeah,
sure?
I know.
So it's even worse. You talked about how all this hot stuff. but this is a problem. The amount of energy required to do what they want to do, to shift continents at those sort of speeds, to push water up out of inside the earth to flood the entire earth, to do all this would heat up the surface of the earth to the point that all that water would boil off and everything is dead.
So the heat
There is
problem
no
is
Noah's
one of
Ark.
my
It is
favorites.
gone.
Yeah, the heat problem is one of my favorite things that doesn't just create problems, it entirely precludes young Earth creationism, not just the
It does.
flood, but young Earth creationism, because you've got to take 4.5 to 4.8 billion years of radiometric decay and cram it into 40 days, essentially, while things are moving around, because that's what they require for this accelerated nuclear decay.
Now,
And
do they claim that the
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
do they claim that the plates moved in just those 40 days, or do they take
Yes.
the whole year?
It
I
depends
heard-
on who you talk to.
I heard Matt Powell say just the other day that plate tectonics is not a real thing.
Yeah, Matt
So-
Powell's an idiot. Like
Yeah,
I'm
Powell.
comfortable saying, like, I try not to talk. There are a great many creationists on YouTube who I get along quite well with, and I don't mind them. Matt Powell is not one of those creationists. But that being said, back to the kinds thing, because I think that that's a really good question, and it's one that is incredibly nebulous. Kind is roughly the family level, except when it's not. And typically, guys like Kent Hovind don't adopt that more like taxonomically legitimate terminology. Kent would say that a kind is defined by reproductive isolation or chromosomes. It depends on the mood that he's in.
So let me tell you why I'm asking the question. The term there in Hebrew is min, M-I-N, and it's used like lexicons will gloss it as species. That's how they gloss it. And the reason they do that is, like, I pulled up Leviticus 11, and it's sort of a passage that probably a lot of people don't go to. But starting down in verse 13, it says, "These are the birds you are to detest and not eat, because they are detestable: the eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, any kind of black kite, any kind of raven, the horned owl, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk." So it seems like it's going the other direction.
It's the specifics.
It's more specific
Yeah.
rather than more general. And when I heard that, like when I heard the use of, or well, maybe it's saying that just, like cat, or, at the family level or whatever. I'm not even saying that correctly, I'm sure. But I thought, well, that's not really how the word is used, seemingly. So I just thought that would be something to point out.
Yeah, so a lot of times the way that creationists will kind of cope with that, at least that I've heard, is that I've seen rather, is that they'll essentially say, well, context matters. And since we're looking at a global flood that the context dictates, surely kind must actually mean family level, because it wouldn't be reasonable to suggest every species went on the ark. So it's like using these insane mental gymnastics to get a meaning from a word that is not, like, I'm going to butcher how you say this, but like hermeneutically correct.
Yeah,
No,
that's
that's
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And Eric,
I think-
if we put that at the family level, where does that put us?
You don't even want to know. Like the anthropology
different. We don't
of
count.
all of that
We
is
don't
very,
count in that we're
very.
separate.
So the weird thing about that, though, is when you look at the hominins, because creationists have this thing where they think that everything at genus Homo, so from Homo erectus onward, because Homo habilis doesn't count because it's too transitional. That fossil is just not real to them. I kid you not. It's just a fake or a conglomeration of bones, even though you find some of them in partial articulation. Insane. But they'll say no. So we're going to go with genus level for humans, so that all of Homo will be together, and then we're going to group genus level for the rest of the great apes. So Pongo for the orangutans, gorilla for gorillas, and Pan for bonobos and chimps. Then they'll say, because the inevitable question is, all right, well, were Neanderthals on the ark? Like, was Homo erectus on the ark? And they take that and put it in reverse. So they say that all of the hominins came from the progenitor of Noah's family, the Noah's family progenitor group. So they're actually degraded forms of human, which
evil.
is taxonomically insane. Like you can run real statistical analysis on these, and you get, I think the number for Neanderthals, like if you run a phylogenetic analysis on Neanderthals and humans, and you say what are the odds essentially that Neanderthals, like when we have our set of data, what are the odds that Neanderthals come from humans rather than that they're a sister species that both come from like Homo heidelbergensis or something similar? And the odds are essentially sequentially picking the same atom in the universe 3 times. It's insane. There is no chance really that Neanderthals descend. They'll still say it. They don't care, but it's
Well, 'cause
insane.
they don't understand evolution in the first place. I mean, when they argue
Oh,
against
God, no.
evolution, they argue against a straw man of evolution, not actual evolution. So
Well, that goes into their the genetic entropy claims, is what they're that's the degradation of Neanderthal is the genetic entropy, and genetic entropy is just not a thing. It's just not something that happens.
that's a misunderstanding of entropy as well.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you go to the second. They think that the second law of thermodynamics is negating evolution, but there's got to be negentropy within the system for entropy to take place at all. And there has to be that energy has to be being put into some part of the system. So our whole environment, the whole Earth, our whole solar system can be in a state of negentropy, despite the fact that entropy is taking place throughout the universe. It has to be burned. Those coals have to be burning somewhere to have the overall entropy trend.
Yeah, the long and short of that too is that if you want to make genetic entropy work as a concept, you have to change the definition of fitness, the applicable definition of fitness that has been in place for over 150 years. You have to change that definition from meaning reproductive success, essentially, into is he strong for the environment? Like, is he fast? Is like to this weird nebulous concept wherein they can essentially point to the likes of cavefish and say, no, their fitness actually went down because they lost their eyes. Well, no, it didn't. They're incredibly successful because they're not wasting metabolic activity on producing eyes in a dark cave where there's light. And this is a definition that's done nothing but yield predictable results for a century and a half. It's insane. But this is what they do. Yeah, they make concepts and then they want to twist the definition so that they can make the concept work. Well, I'm going to stop you right there. If you have to change the definition, the concept doesn't work. Like you reject the hypothesis, you move on.
And if you're changing the definitions we use, again, you're arguing a straw man. You're not actually arguing the topic.
Yeah.
So go and actually learn what evolution says. Go learn about abiogenesis as well, because you guys are always conflating the two bloody things, which is really annoying. And
there's misuse of the concept of something being testable too. As testable, repeatable, blah blah blah. Testable doesn't mean that we bring life into a lab and we have a dog turn into a cat. It means that we can make a prediction of like Tiktaalik of we expect during this time frame in this environment that we are going to find this type of life form. That's testable. That's testing. You're setting your hypothesis and you go out into the field and you test your hypothesis. And what do they find? They find what they thought they would find in that environment from that time frame. That is testable and predictable.
And on the flip,
something very similar.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, a very common talking point that I've heard lately from creationists is they will say, but we are making predictions now. They'll tote out their Nathaniel Jeansons and their Georgia Turners, and they'll be like, look at us, we're making predictions. Cool. Did they pan out?
Yeah. And let's see how that works out.
Yeah. Then there's this eerie silence. So you could cut it with a knife, because making a prediction and then not testing it is not really a prediction outside of like the colloquial sense, right? Like it's just, hey, like I could sit here and say, you know what? I predict at this time in 60 years at this exact spot, a giant ass meteor is going to slam right into this part of the country. That's technically a prediction. But
So
what
it's
is
like
it
a
to support?
prophecy. They're using like a prediction is a synonym with prophecy, and that's not the way that we use it when we're talking about the scientific method.
And they always use the colloquial sense of everything.
Yeah.
For example,
Well, they
theory.
interchange it. It's all or nothing. There's
And-
we keep generalizing, but just these are the people that I engage with. They don't recognize the polysemous nature of any words at all.
I mean, I think they actually do though, because they've been told so many times. They've had it pointed out to them.
There's a dissonance there.
Ken Hovind knows that when he uses the word theory wrong, he's in the wrong context. He's using it wrong. He has had it explained to him enough times that he knows it's wrong. He is just disingenuous.
So
he uses the word evolution wrong constantly.
He does. That's frustrating.
So when I was getting ready to debate Kent Hovind, I consumed an inordinate amount of Kent Hovind content. I mainlined the Kent Hovind content. That is what I did to prepare. And the number of times that he had the law of monophily taught to him, it was over a dozen. And essentially the law, for those of you maybe in the audience who don't know what the law of monophily is, Kent and many creationists will frequently say, well, you're never going to have a dog produce a non-dog. Of course not, because you don't outgrow.
Like Kelly, it just means you never outgrow your ancestry. You
Right,
never become what your parents weren't.
That's it, which is why humans are still vertebrates. We're still animals. We're still mammals. We're still primates. We're still haplorhines. We're still anthropoids. We're still hominoids, but we're also hominins and members of genus Homo and the species Sapiens.
And
So
all eukaryotes.
yeah. I mean, it's
And that's Linnaean taxonomy, which is just basically guideposts, because statistically we're all on a gradient. But
and the ultimate irony is that Linnaeus was like that. There's a famous quote from Linnaeus where he's like, this is the modern paraphrasing of it, but he's essentially sitting there and he's got a gibbon and an orangutan skeleton sitting in front of him, and he's like, man, I'm about to bring down the wrath of all theologians, because I cannot for the life of me find a skeletal difference between these apes and an anatomically modern human. They have all the same stuff. They even walk around in the same way sometimes. I mean, you can. It's just really difficult, and so he created a new group for humans, but essentially was like, it's because I don't know, we're special.
the chain of being was what he was challenging, so he couldn't push too hard against that, because the systematics they used before there was the chain of being with God on top, and then like angels, and then humans, and then clean animals, and so on and so forth. So that's what he was trying to take down. He didn't want to take down too much.
So he'd also be remembering what the church did to people like Galileo previously. The church wielded a lot of power at the time, and still does in some places. And it's like, you don't go against the establishment.
So I have a question for Dr. Josh, actually, because I had a conversation with with that coworker I was mentioning earlier a long time ago, and we were having kind of a discussion about this. It read in the context of the culture, are Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 a single creation story, or are they separate ones?
They're separate. In fact, they're written by ostensibly two different sources. So
No, neither of those sources was Moses, right?
No. There's a video on our channel where we had Yale professor Dr. Joel Baden come on, and this is what he does. He does this type of formation of the Pentateuch, and he wrote a book basically reviving what's called the documentary hypothesis. If you guys have heard of that, and reviving is not the right word, but nuancing it in a way that makes it more meaningful. But there are debates about, they're pretty fierce debates about how the texts in the Pentateuch were edited together. Were they edited together some, earlier, and then layers of redaction were put on, and then later another set of layers of redaction were put on? Or do you have 3 or 4 main sources that, during the Persian period or whatever, or the exilic period, were woven together by, the last guy to come by and edit it. So the way that this, the individual stories were woven together or pieced together and edited, that's debated. But he made the comment. I said, so what is it that everybody agrees on? And he said, well, we know that Moses didn't write it. We know that one person didn't write it. And we've known that for about 150 years. That's been established, settled scholarship, which is surprising to a lot of people because it's not on YouTube, right? It's not settled on YouTube.
Oh yeah, the bastion of academic truth.
Yes. But no, Genesis 1 is its own priestly story, right? The priestly writer probably came by at the very end and put this on sort of as a head to the Genesis 1 through 11 primeval history. And you can see very significant differences between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, 4, and 3. It is so much so that trying to reconcile them becomes sort of comical, I think. But people do it. I did it when I was an evangelical. So, yeah, but no, that's pretty much settled. Two different stories.
Another history issue that really impressed me is the work that Holy Kool-Aid has done on Exodus and Egyptian history. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he said is that if you take all the people that the Bible claims went on the Exodus and line them up single file, the first one would reach the promised land before the last one left Egypt. That just blew my mind.
Yeah. I really appreciated that series. He emailed me, I think, when he was in his second video, and he said, "Can you get me some sources for the Exodus that you would you trust?" Mm-hmm. And so he had it without me. He didn't need me to do anything. But I think it was nice that I think for him just sort of verifying, okay, these are good citations that he had. But no, I think he did a great job with it.
It still amazes me that they got lost for 40 years when all they had to do was walk up the coast. It's just
right?
I had a professor who taught I had to take one cultural class for an anthropology minor, and our professor was she's this staunch Catholic woman, and when someone inevitably was like, "Hey, so what do you think about the Exodus?" She was like, "Oh yeah, that did not happen the way it is described. No." She's like, "There is no support for that at all." And they were like, "Okay, well, how do you cope with that?" And she was like, I don't tend to take everything as literally as others do." But I thought that was very interesting. That was kind of an aha similar moment for me, because I was like, wait a second. I'd never really given, a whole lot of thought to the fact that the archaeology is just in this staunch contrast to everything that comes from this heavy evangelical fundamental side. And I thought that, and I actually, Dr. Joss, I've seen quite a bit of your content. I watched a lot of it probably like a year ago, though, so there wasn't nearly as much at that time. But yeah, there's some stuff there that you're like, wow, I don't know how they managed to kind of do those mental gymnastics. But
well, I can tell you because I did it. And I did not, I actually was not raised in a Christian home. I was raised in an agnostic home, and I converted to Christianity at 16. And one of the strongest influences on me was Josh McDowell. And I ate up everything that he wrote, and it fell for all of it, hook, line, and sinker. And a lot of that is still out there today. There's still Christians today saying that there is no archaeology that disproves anything in the Bible. Hogwash.
The chronology, the David roll chronology makes me want to jump in front of oncoming traffic. I can't with that.
I mean, I actually heard that somebody say that today. And I was in my truck and I laughed. I laughed out loud. And see, this is what's so interesting about this. And I don't obviously consider myself a New Testament scholar. I have a lot of New Testament training, but that's not what I got my PhD in. So, but this whole minimal facts style argument for the resurrection tickles me a little, because the rationale behind it seems to be we can support these natural historical events with beyond, I guess, reasonable doubt, and therefore the supernatural claim undergirding it must be true, or not undergirding it, which it undergirds, I suppose. And what's interesting to me about that, and I'm going to do a video on this, I have the script written, I just have to find the time to do it. There was a king by the name of Naram Sin, who, if you guys know who Sargon is, but in the in the mid to late third millennium, he was there was this set of kings that ruled over the old Akkadian, in the old Akkadian period, and Naram Sin was Sargon's grandson, and so everything that I'm getting ready to say, we have actual clay tablets and like statuary with inscriptions on them. So, like, we have them. You can go pick them up and look at them, the originals, right? It's not that we have copies of copies of copies that we have to use textual criticism and piece it back together. So Naram Sin, there was a series of battles that we're pretty sure actually took place. And it was significant enough. The story tells us, the inscription tells us that he fought the north and the south. They all came together to fight against him. We knew who the kings were, and what cities took part in it. And Naram Sin defeated them, held them off in the city of Agaday. And the people of the city were so grateful. Now we know the battles happened, right? And the people were so grateful that they requested of the gods, says in the inscription that we have, keep wanting to emphasize that, that the gods deify Naram Sin. And they did. The gods deified him. Now, you might say, well, gosh, it's just a story. Well, we have administrative texts, lots of them, from that period. And there's a point where you see in the administrative text, right after these battles took place, where Naram Sin name starts appearing with the divine determinative before it. And later, so we have them. You can hold the tablet. So you see when it happened, and you have evidence. Look, they've deified him, right? The people, the people writing it thought he was God, clearly. Enough to put it on the tablet anyway. So then later, during the Ur III period, so a couple hundred years later, later scribes didn't like Naram Sin. He was the first king to deify himself like this. To be deified. Sorry, by the gods, not do it himself. Sorry.
Of course.
Because we have documents that show that the gods did it.
They had their own electors.
What's wrong with me? But later scribes didn't like Naram Sin, and so what they did is in the history they elevated the other kings to divine status and talked bad about Naram Sin. Why else would they do that? They must have known that he was a god. Obviously, this is why they brought him down, right? Because they knew it was true. What other conclusion could we draw? We have all these original texts that show that he was made a god. It's the minimal facts.
That's actually wild. That's wild. I've never heard that before. That's really cool.
But nobody would think twice about that. They go, yeah, he was like a pompous douchebag that wanted to make him. Who's going to say no to the king, right? Of course they're going to. Yeah, okay, but you're the god, I
need to interrupt for just a moment.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Jen needs to get going. So we need to let Jen have a chance to plug her channel and tell us about anything she's got up so she can get going.
Yeah, I probably need to get going too.
Yeah, it's okay. We've already plugged our channels anyway, and links in the description. But I have a Stump Jen coming. Can't even talk at the moment. Coming up on Saturday. It'll be morning for people in the US, midday-ish for the UK, and evening if you're in Australia. My main guest for that episode is Conspiracy Cats.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Should be a lot of fun. So if you're wanting to ask questions of myself or Cats or anybody else I drag in later into the conversation, please hop in the chat and have fun there.
Okay. Thank you for coming, Jen. It's been good having you.
Good to see you again, Jen.
Yeah, it's good to
Good to
talk
meet
to
you
you.
again.
Yeah, good to meet you too, Erika. Bye.
Bye. Okay. Actually, I did have one more question that I wanted to ask, particularly of Brainbug and Josh. Is I had another new idea for an argument, and my argument is that God had to have planned for the sin of man. Obviously, there's a number of reasons why, but the new one that I came up with is because if, as young Earth creationists claim, there was no death before the fall. If there was no fall, the insects would have overrun the earth and eaten the garden. And unfortunately, we don't know the size of the garden or the number of species there were, so we can't calculate actually how long it would take. But, how long would it take insects to overcome the earth if none of them ever died?
Are there dimensions given for the garden?
No, that's a big part of the problem. But let's imagine it's the size of, say, a small city.
Well, with no death, because like Hematarins. So let's take like ants or wasp to any, because ants are a kind of wasp. I don't know if that's common knowledge or not, but ants are just terrestrial wasp. So they tend to dominate their habitat. So without being able to be killed, they would just completely cultivate, because they were resculpting their habitats way before humans started doing that. Millions of years before we came on the scene, they were farming and building cities and agriculture. They had domesticated livestock and plants and fungus as well. It would have just been the garden would have just been a giant ant kingdom, or more than likely, anyhow.
I've heard the argument before that insects, arthropods in general, don't count as being alive because they don't have like the breath of God in them. Because apparently, like book lungs and spiracles they're not like a thing as far as something that they care about. They don't think that they breathe like real animals do.
Well, and their cell walls are closer to the cell walls of a fungus than they are to the cell walls of other.
I didn't know that.
Animals. Yeah, it's. I think that's protostomia in general. That's one of the defining characteristics of that split. Nervardia actually taught me that. So
that's awesome.
Isn't that a little nice bit of trivia there? But spiracles are actually superior for breathing the breath of life up to a certain size.
That's interesting.
Surface area is a hell of a drug, right?
Right.
I was envisioning the locusts, and particularly just eating everything in the garden until there was nothing left.
Well, I think the cooperative nature of Hymenoptera I think they would be the rulers. Like I have a communal tank back here, a forest floor, which I have a video coming out on Friday where we're going to get in there and actually explore. Someone asked me, well, how can you have a forest floor without ants? You couldn't put ants in there. They would just, everything else would be done. Wherever ants find themselves, they dominate that environment. That's just how they are. They're a warlike people, so to speak. Yeah.
Eusociality, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like, that kind of wigs me out. Like the whole concept of use, because I took
have no self.
Undergrad, and that whole concept, like learning about eusociality, specifically the evolution of it, but also just like once it's there, it just proliferates like crazy because it's so efficient.
that's the cool thing in Bladderday. Okay, the family that cockroaches and termites are in. Yes, we have every stage going towards from being like parasocial, like where they just kind of live near each other, like hissers, all the way every step, all the way up to eusocial, because hardly anything's more eusocial than a termite outside of Hymenoptera anyway. So we have every stage in the evolutionary steps going towards eusocialism. But Hymenoptera is the king of it. That's why I think that, given a deathless Garden of Eden scene, that they would be the rulers. Just that there's no sense of self. It'd basically be one giant biomass of it's almost like a single life form. It's like what she was saying. The way that their society works. And speaking of genders earlier, or sexes earlier, when you get into Hymenoptera, you got some weird stuff going on there too. No male Hymenoptera has a father. They're
all haploid, right?
Yeah, you got it. And unfertilized eggs. There I go. There's my tangent for the night about bugs. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. That's okay.
I love.
She's still awake.
No, I was sorry. I was Megan walking in. Let me know I probably need to wrap up.
Yeah, we do. We've been going for almost an hour and a half, and that's usually what I do is 90 minutes. So it's been wonderful having you all. I think this has been a great discussion, and I do plan to make this show every month, trying to get more and more people on. And one of my primary purposes is to draw different people that you don't normally see together, so that all of our followers will come together and say, hey, there's someone I've never seen before. I might be interested in their channel too. I'm just going to try to get a different group every month. So before we say so long, Brainbug, what do you have coming up?
I have that forest floor video that's releasing on Friday, but Saturday is a big day because if anybody doesn't know, my friend Ethan, your friendly neighborhood atheist, had a starring role in Matt Powell's new movie, The Atheist Religion. So we are reviewing that, and I have a big old stack of citations to go right along with it. Did you see the part about the rafting monkeys, Erika? Did you see that?
I have specifically been. I don't think I can handle that much Matt Powell content like in a single sitting. So I've been slowly inoculating myself by consuming it bit by bit. So no, I don't believe I've gotten to that. I'm sure it is very accurate, well sourced. Just really good content, I'm sure.
You will love it. But I have lots of good stuff on rafting too. Did you do a video on rafting yet? I thought that you did.
I covered a bit of rafting with Homo floresiensis, and with regard to that, and with regard to the Platyrrhine split.
Right.
But not
the Platyrrhine split's what I'm mainly talking about. But and of course cavimorphs along with them.
Yeah, you want those tarantulas. You want the photos for that. They've got that weird 2133 dental formula. That's that classic New World monkey.
Yeah.
And Dr. Josh, what do you have coming up?
So we are trying to. It looks like there's a good chance we're gonna be able to get Irving Finkel, Dr. Finkel. If you guys are familiar with him, on the channel. We don't know what he's going to talk about yet. We emailed him to ask him if he wanted to talk about his flood tablet that he found, which is really amazing. That would be cool, but he might be all talked out on that. So we'll see. But Megan and I recorded did the Old Testament endorsed slavery book on audiobook. So I read it. I read the main portion, and then she reads all the lengthy quotes. So you get to hear her beautiful British voice. But it looks like we've been waiting for it to actually pop up. It's submitted. I mean, it's accepted and everything and distributed, but we're waiting for it to pop up on Audible and Apple. But it popped up on something today.
Spotify?
Script. Hold on. Because I got really excited when I saw it. It's on something called...
Megan does have a lovely voice, by the way. I could listen to her talk for hours.
Yeah, true.
Uscribe. It came up on Uscribe. That's not showing up, is it? Yeah. So
Right.
that's pretty cool. But yeah, so a lot of people have been asking because I guess it's easier to listen to a book, which it is. So yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
He's always got hard copies of everything right there with him too.
I know.
He's got a book ready for any of these ancient Near East topics. He's like, well, if you look at this,
They're all like weapon-sized books too. Like,
Yeah.
the kind that if you hit someone in the head with them, it would severely hurt them.
see, I need to put them back here so people will know that I'm smart.
See, that's
People-
not my tactic. I put mine behind me so that you know I read books. Because everyone knows if you can see them, then you've read them.
Yes, clearly. It always tickles me when people put they take a picture and I don't usually look at them. I look at the books that are on the shelf behind them and I go, have you really read that? I don't know that you've really read that. Like there was somebody, I won't mention their name, but you could see the standard New Testament Greek lexicon. It's a big book called BDAG, Bauer, Dankert, and Gingrich. And I thought, have you used that? Did you find that at a used bookstore or something? Did somebody give that to you? Because I don't think you know Greek. But
Oh my
I know?
god. I try to keep the books that at least are visible as ones that I have actually read. And the ones that I'm like TBR are like lower on the shelf so no one calls me out.
I ask you something about it, say, hey, did you get to in that chapter there? You're like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I refuse to be busted for being behind on my reading.
Now, I have used Jackson Wheat's book in a couple of my videos, but
the rocks
The rocks were there.
yes, I have not read that cover to cover.
It's okay. It's a very lengthy tome.
Yes, I generally look through it for what specifically I need to talk about that on that particular day.
Yep. Yeah, RJ is a source fiend. So, the best part about that book is the fact that you could be like, I want to know about what creationists are saying about plate tectonics. And there's something in the back for that, I promise. RJ probably has like 15 sources for it too. He is a fiend.
Well, Atheist Slam Dunk I've read more of that than what was in The Rocks Were There, but that was a fun read too. That's RJ's previous work.
Oh, the reptile mammal transition?
Yeah, it's basically that's what it's covering.
Yeah, that's a cool.
Synapsids. Yeah. Or the evolution of synapsids, which is a fascinating topic if you're interested in that sort of thing.
I get a little, I don't know, I get a little depressed when I start talking about synapsids because they're so weird looking and ugly and cool, and it bums me out that we don't have any of our like Kingoria. I think Kingoria is the most hideous and adorable like fossil animal out there, and I want one,
But we're synapsids.
Yeah, but like the more the Dicynodonts.
Yeah.
Like, more the Dicynodonts bum me out.
Things with the lumpy skulls and
oh god, they're so ugly. They're adorable. I love them so much. They're fat and awkward, and they're like the heads are really tiny, and they're like sprawling stances and these weird growths all over their heads. And
the tiny head.
Orthorhynchus is my fave. Oh no. Yeah, I did not plug my stuff. I should plug my stuff. What do I have coming up? I'm very close to being finished with the video on evolution and statistics. So the statistics of common ancestry, essentially. I'm hoping to get that out tomorrow or maybe even late tonight. I'm doing a Q&A on Thursday because I reached 5,000 subscribers.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I was really psyched. I genuinely did not think I would reach 5,000. So I was like, I guess I'll do a Q&A. I mean, I'm pretty hard on my sleeve. I don't really know if there's anything that I haven't like bled all over people about, but I am nevertheless having a Q&A on Thursday. So that should be fun. And then tomorrow, interestingly enough, Brian, I'm actually having Sal Cordova come on my channel. He wanted to talk about, Sal Cordova is he's a creationist. A young earth creationist, believe it or not, but he reached out because he works a lot in R, and so do I, or not in R, but he works with phylogenetics, and I am currently working with phylogenetics in R. And he was like, let's like swap some notes and stuff like that on working in phylogenetics, and I was like, listen, yes, because I could always learn more about how to work with the trees. And, fortunately, Sal does do like legit work with the phylogenetic trees. I'm not 100% sure how he squares that with the worldview stuff, but I'm interested to ask him. And plus, Sal's just a really nice guy, so I'm happy to have him on my channel to do kind of R workshop. My whole idea is I'm like, hey, here's R, here's how you use it, here's how you run a phylogeny in R. Mostly because it took me, probably a week and a half to figure out how to do it. So I'm more than happy to share that with others so that they don't have to take that time to.
You got a date for that? That sounds amazing.
Do I have
a date? Do you have a date for that?
Oh, Wednesday. Yeah.
Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah. So tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh God. Yeah. Tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, tomorrow. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, it should be really cool. I work with primates, so I use 10K trees for my like genetic samples, but it should be neat. Dr. Josh is like, please just kill me now. Like phylogenetic trees are like, of course that's me when you're like language stuff, I'm like, oh God, I'm an idiot. I need to read more about the language stuff. I love
you don't.
But that's like what you were saying earlier about knowing a geologist. When I needed somebody to talk about ancient Near East stuff, I had Dr. Josh on. So it's about having a community where we can all have somebody who we can add.
Oh yeah, part of the benefit of coming on the channel today is now I feel like I have license to pester Jen and Dr. Josh and God whenever I need. I already pester Brainbug, but I can pester the three of you now too. Added to the list.
Sounds good.
Yes.
I already have been pestering both you all, so that's
that's the name of the game.
And what I have coming up on my channel, I'm currently working on a video that is an acceptance of the challenge that Cameron Bertuzzi and Braxton Hicks threw down about a month ago. It was a challenge to atheists with regards to the logic of
Braxton Hunter.
I'm sorry, Braxton Hunt. Thank you.
Okay. Braxton Hicks is the fake.
Yes, I know. My daughter just had a baby recently, so that's why on my mind and not Braxton Hunter. But anyway, but yeah, they had a challenge with regards to whether or not you can both not believe in God and say that, or I should say, not. Take the stance that you do not that you say that God doesn't exist, but just that you lack belief in God's, and that you also compare God to things that don't exist. So I'm taking them up on that challenge, and I've got that one finished. And then I do this stream every Tuesday at 7 Central. And I vary the topic. Once a month, it's going to be Why Are We Here? But the rest of the weeks, sometimes it's something fun. This next week, I'm hoping to put something together that's political, though, because Mo Brooks is my congressman. And if you don't know what Mo Brooks is up, he is the one that is leading the charge to try to get Congress to overturn the election. And Godless Engineer lives in my area. And so he is Godless Engineer's congressman as well. So I haven't asked him yet, but I'm going to ask John. But John's done a lot of stuff with me. I wouldn't be surprised if he said, it's time for someone else's turn. So we will see. If John is not busy, next week's stream is going to be John and I talking about what a horrible congressman Mo Brooks is.
The states I switch between are usually Indiana and Arkansas as far as where I'm at. And so I sympathize.
I lived in Indiana for 22 years.
So Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Missouri to Illinois, me. So yeah, it's
the scourge Midwest. That yeah. It's
so thank you, Erika. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dr. Josh. Thank you to everyone in the chat for coming. It has been a wonderful discussion, and I look forward to seeing you all again. And everyone, get the vaccine and live your life. Bye.